I love Audette Fulbright. She has a really gifted way with words. And honestly, I want Bill to read everything I've ever written because it sounds so smart and so important when he reads. So I remember her voice like it was yesterday. She'd call on the phone, sometimes to speak to her niece, my partner, and sometimes to speak to me, and sometimes just to speak to whomever answered the phone. Annette was old, and we were young. She had wisdom to share, and we had the kind of naive, youthful exuberance that made her smile despite what her church said about our sinful lifestyle. It helped that I would bring her fresh vegetables from our garden, and occasionally a dessert that would send her blood sugar into the stratosphere, which neither she nor I ever confessed to her doctors. "What have you done for your country today?" she shouted into the phone. Now, Annette shouted because she was old, remember, and deaf, and she didn't like her hearing aids, especially in the summer. So she just yelled and required everyone to yell back. "What have you done for your country today?" That was her stylized way of asking, what have you accomplished today that is worth talking about? Have you read the paper? Made coffee? Not killed anybody? All excellent things to accomplish before lunch? It was a question asked by a member of the greatest generation who understood that we all have an obligation to do something to contribute to society. This was a woman who might have done anything had she been born in another age, but she was born when she was, and so her options were limited. She could have been a nurse, a secretary, housewife and mother, or a nun. She chose to be a nurse. And she told us stories of when she was in nursing school and early in her career, and her father owned a small local market in Waterville, Maine, and he would trade ration coupons with some of the young salesmen that came through so he could get silk stockings that were required for her work uniform. Now, her father was forever bringing home salesmen that stopped at his store, bring them home to share a meal with his family. When his wife Alva saw him coming home up the road with yet another stranger, she simply added a couple potatoes to whatever was cooking to make it stretch as far as it needed in order to feed everyone at the table. And she sliced that morning's fresh bread a little thinner so that there would be enough for everyone to have at least one slice. Annette lived in the nursing school dormitory, as I recall the story, and spent much of World War II working night shifts in the hospital, attending classes during the day, and rolling bandages for the war effort. That's a thing, right? I'm seeing some nods. Yeah. I'm not sure how bandages rolled by nursing students in Waterville, Maine may have made it to the front lines of Europe or in the Pacific, but she and her nursing student colleagues rolled mountains of the things. I have to say that 50 or more years after the war, when my partner and I were teaching ourselves how to cook Chinese food and we were figuring out egg rolls, that gal was the best at rolling egg rolls. We struggled and struggled and struggled, and she watched us and she said, "Oh, can I try that?" And I confess I had some preconceived notions about her arthritic hands and what she might be able to do, and how this is newfangled fancy cooking, not like, there's no potatoes boiled here. What are we going to do? And she went lickety split snap, and they were the tightest, most perfectly sealed egg rolls I've ever seen. And she said, just like bandages. Just like rolling bandages, except we didn't wet the bandages at the end of the roll. "What have you done for your country today?" she barked into the phone. And I say barked probably because of the volume of that call, but I could always hear the smile on her face. What were the kids, that was us, up to today? And we were always doing interesting things. I was teaching myself how to fish at that time and was still very bad at it. I shared my stories with her. My partner and I had gone every now and then what we would call yard sailing for interesting treasures on a college student's budget. She loved our stories. Now, my relationship to this family of my first partner provided me with a new understanding of how to relate to one's surroundings, be it family, neighborhood, community, or various gradations of public life. The family I grew up in did not speak plainly about service and good deeds. Volunteer work was done generally through the church or school, but was removed somehow from regular conversation. It wasn't something we talked about at dinner. Nobody ever asked me, what did you do today that was good? Occasionally I was asked if I had finished my homework or chores, but never was I expected to find something that needed doing and to go do it. In fact, on the few times that I got creative about being helpful, I was more often scolded for doing whatever the help was incorrectly. It's not an incentive plan. So hearing somebody ask, what have you done for your country, was a new thing. And it prompted me to be mindful about my actions through the day. It guided me into a way of thinking that intentionally noticed people and things around me that might be helped or lifted up. I grew a lot in that first relationship. I learned to make being helpful a habit. When visiting the aforementioned aunt, before I left, I would be sure to ask if there was anything heavy that needed to be brought up or down a flight of stairs. Was there anything that needed to be reached down or put back up on a high shelf? Service in these small things became sort of a natural habit. Now, I confess I'm not as good at this sort of practice now as I was back then, perhaps because it seems to be that I more often tend to be the one who needs things carried up or down, as opposed to helping someone else. But one of the deepest things I learned in that practice of intentional, simple service was that little things make for big relationships. Small kindnesses offered and exchanged regularly are the building blocks of strong, deep relationships. The sort of relationship where someone can call you and say, I fell while I was walking. Come to the hospital and bring me my hearing aid and my teeth. I got that call one morning. It's like, okay, I guess I'm family now. Small acts of service let others know we are thinking of them and their needs, and it is human nature to like and appreciate someone who cares about you and your comfort. So what might it take for us to develop that sort of habit of asking ourselves, instead of what have you done for your country today, because we're UUs and that's a little weird, but what have you done out of love for the world today? What might it take for us to ask each other this question? Each other, not just ourselves. What have you done out of love for the world today? What kindness have you offered today that made the world a better place to be? I remember one day sitting outside, I was in seminary, sitting outside a little pizzeria with a friend in Newton Center. It was a warm spring afternoon and we were waiting for our food. A man who appeared to belong to the local population of unhoused folks in the Boston area was picking up bottles and cans on the streets and sidewalks to turn in for the 5-cent deposit. He was fairly nondescript, as many of the homeless folks are to those with more comfort and privilege. He was white, of indeterminate age, and had dark hair that was untrimmed and uncombed. His clothes were tattered and worn, and it appeared that neither he nor his clothing had enjoyed the luxury of a bath in recent days. He was neither high nor drunk that we could discern, but he may have had some mental health diagnoses beyond our expertise to recognize. He moved in the manner of someone practiced at being invisible. For being homeless, dirty, and poor in Newton's Center will often attract the unwelcome attention of law enforcement or wary shopkeepers. But he puttered quietly at his task, separating his treasures into categories of glass, plastic, and tin cans to more easily claim his reward at the grocery store later that day. We observed him for a little while. Knowing the two of us, we were likely discussing in lofty terms the injustice of capitalism and greed and the irony of an unhoused person in Newton Center, Massachusetts, picking up bottles for spare change to scrape together whatever his needs for the day might be amid mansions, cottages that sell for $1 million. So he pulled his little grocery cart along. It was one of those square ones, right, like your grandmother took on the bus, right? And he bent to pick up bits of trash, as well as the bottles and cans. And he put the trash in the trash can on the corner, and the bottles and cans he put in his cart. I remember as we were sitting there, he found a water bottle. It was maybe a third full. He unscrewed the cap, and he walked to where there was a tree planted in the sidewalk and poured out the water at the base of the tree. And he returned to his cart where he stashed the bottle with its similar mates. It was my lunch friend who remarked on this simple kindness, offering water he found to the tree instead of merely pouring it out on the sidewalk to evaporate. The tree could never offer this man anything in return. It was a sapling not due to produce shade for another decade. So this act was one of real, however humble, generosity, done without thought for recognition or reward. It was simply the kind thing to do. What have you done to love the world today? Acts of kindness and generosity need not be grand gestures like donating $1 million to a particular cause, although if you feel so moved, the church will not turn down $1 million donation. But acts of kindness can be as simple as watering a tree whose shade you may never enjoy. Our theme for June is renewal. And this has me thinking about ways that we can renew our practices of generosity and kindness. How might we renew our commitment to love? How might we renew our commitment to justice? How might we train ourselves to offer kindness as an automatic reflex? Do you need anything heavy moved before I go? Is there anything in the attic you need brought down? Crock pot? No? Okay. Anything in the cellar you need brought up? Okay, great. I'm running out to the store for a few things. Need anything? I'm hitting the coffee drive-thru. Want me to pick something up for you on my way? We can offer this sort of thing to our spouses or partners or parents or kids or neighbors or coworkers or the tree planted in the sidewalk downtown outside a pizzeria in a suburban town. These acts of spiritual generosity are what connect us to each other in small ways that weave together to make deep, meaningful relationships where we know that we can rely on each other for the big things, like my hearing aid in my teeth. So I invite us this week to ask yourselves, at least once each day, what have I done to love the world today? What have I done to make the world a better place, even in some tiny sort of way? Particularly hard days for me, that means I drank coffee before I left the house. That is a public safety measure. But still, what have I done to make the world a better place, even in some tiny sort of way? May this grow into a regular practice, and may it always be our practice and our prayer. Amen. Now, I'm pretty sure I got this